So I was obviously thinking about extra bits to include on the line, and got onto signals and thoughts about point motors as well for my various parts of the layout. So obviously with phase 1, area 2, Marylebone, there are nice pictures of the signal gantries at Marylebone, which I think they still had up to the 80s. And I have seen pictures of older ones of the one in Aylesbury as well. So I was quite keen to include for this part having signals on the station, especially as well as because it's an end-to-end. It's a very sort of manual layout to run. There'll be sort of a lot of stop-start, and so unlike a tail chaser where I could just leave the trains running and watch them go around, I'd need to do more. So I did sort of think, well, could you actually also manually operate the signals and the points? So that was one thought I had down my mind. When it obviously comes to the underground, and it will be lights, and probably automatic lighting. So I'm also going to go for point motors with the DCC. So that will all be a new experience for me. But yes, operating these little ratio signals was a thought, and then that got me thinking about obviously operating the points manually. So I had a go at just putting a simple wire lever in, which works quite well. Obviously it's a lot easier to fit them before you finish the board as working upside down under there, trying to get this whole thing to operate was a little bit frustrating. Okay, so when I was then looking on online on YouTube, obviously I could find a number of videos where you do the simple push-pull rod fitted to the frame, but I was wondering if you could manually operate the various points through, I suppose, a little lever frame like a signal box. And obviously you can buy the nice ones that do look like a proper signal box lever, but they tend to connect then to an electronic motor. So I was looking for something that's a bit more mechanical minded, and came across Gormo's shed from, gosh, it must be 10 years ago I think, where there's a little sort of 20-second clip where he basically shows you something like this. Hang on. So this got me into the interesting world of levers and Bellcranks. Still can't say that word. So the setup I've got, it sort of sits, it'll sit under the board, and I've just got 4 levers on this simple arrangement. And effectively, in the vertical position, obviously things are safe, so either the points on the through and not the siding, or your signal, be it stop, and then obviously as you pull it, you open it up to either change the direction and obviously then change the point to safe and proceed. So vertical is always safe, which should be stop or main line, I suppose. So how does it work? The lever, the rocker arm just transmits the movement back close to the frame again. So that one's just transmitting the energy back. So by pulling back, it's pushing forward on the rod. And then obviously as the rod then pushes forward, you can then decide what you want the movement to do depending on where you need the final movement to be. So with this one, I want the movement to move left and right. So I'm using the bell crank to change the direction. In the simplest one, if I was just wanting to move it in the vertical, I would just connect straight from there through to that point. If you needed to reverse the movement so that as the rod moves forward, you need the connecting rod through to the point or the signal to move backwards, you then basically just change the arrangement of the bell crank to reverse the direction. So once you get your head around it, it's quite easy to work out that there's a whole number of combinations you can use to effectively make the mechanical movement work. So very simple. So you can see I've just got to support the rodding, these are just old bits of a bracket cut up. I have seen where you can also support it with the clips that you use for like telephone wires, and I've also just used blocks of wood with a little hole drilled through. It seems to work quite well as well. So the principle's there. I'm going to give it a go for the bigger stations when I get there, although at the moment I think Marylebone's got 12 points and Aylesbury's got 13, so it's going to be quite a complex thing to do, but I think it'll be good fun to have a go. And it'll be a while before I get to that stage in the build anyway, so I've got plenty of time to plan ahead. What I have learned from doing the Wendover one is once I've worked out where the track and the points are going to go, I'll need to connect this all up first whilst I'm working on the underside of the board, and I can see what I'm doing, because once the board's in position and you're doing the scenics and that, it's just impossible to install all of this. But yeah, that's as far as I'm going to take it. I'm not going to go as far as interlocking. I have looked, and again, it's an interesting thing. Yeah, so as I was saying, I had to look at interlocking. It's interesting, but yeah, it's probably a step too far for me at this point. If you're wondering how this is all made up, it's just simple. So I've got 6mm rod, threaded rod through, and just a load of 6mm bolts. I've got the nylon nuts, so they just hold their position. For my levers at the moment, these are just simple rose ties that you bang into the wall, like a nail with a hole in it that you'd thread the wire to hold your roses up with. I might file these down, make them more like a handle at the end. Obviously some simple right angle brackets, so all of this you can just get from a hardware store for a few pence. And then the other side, I just bought some aluminium rod bar, so that's 10mm wide, about 1mm thick, and again just using the brackets and the nuts just to give the spacing, just so you've got some room to work with. Drill a couple of holes either end, and then again this is just, what is it, it's about 1.5 to 2mm thick garden wire. So, and then I bought some 20mm thick bar, and basically just to make the bell cranks, saw it on the diagonal to make them, and a few drilling of holes. So it's quite simple to do. When I come to show you the bigger stations, I'll show you more of the different arrangements you can have for the different types of movements. So everything I've put together 100%, I got it from Gourmet's videos. He just shows you the arrangements and you can pretty quickly work out yourself what you need to do. So cheers Gourmet, it was a great inspiration for me, and yeah, he's definitely a man after my own heart. He's what I would call a scratch build engineer for model railway. Bit like Lakeside, you know, it's a guy there who's just thinks about things and comes up with a solution. So between the two of them, they are a great inspiration with their various videos. So yeah, cheers guys. Okay, I suppose it's a good point to start talking about what am I actually going to build. So this scribble meant a lot to me for quite a long time, but I realised it was just overlaid 4 layers. I understood it, but I appreciate it wasn't going to communicate things very simply. So having finally bought a house and got a loft space, I could then start working out what I was going to do. So although I'm saying I'm building on 3 levels, it's sort of 3.5 levels. So this is going to be the underground starting at Amersham. It's going to run in to London. It'll do a loop round underneath London and then it'll come back out. And I'm thinking about another end station at Uxbridge. So, which may allow me to do a loop back, so I can actually have the underground running as a continuous loop for part of it, or part of it will effectively be an end to end with a reverse loop. So that's the underground. Right, Aylesbury to Marylebone. So Aylesbury starts here, which allow me to sort of replicate the layout of Aylesbury Station, come through Wendover, Amersham, and then running round into Marylebone here. So that's deck 1. Also on deck 1, I'm going to have another big London station that will run phase 3 and 4, but that's a long way off yet. But as I build deck 1, I will make space for the later parts of the layout, and I may need to lay some of the track and do some of the electrics, just simply because I won't be able to get access to that part in the loft later. So thinking about that. This then becomes deck 2, so you'd effectively come up from deck 1, run through, round. So I've got Long Buckby, where I used to live for 25 years, and it's going to end at sort of Rugby with a reverse loop back. So again, this would be a sort of an end-to-end reverse back with a couple of lines running up and down, and then obviously behind it, the red is the phase 4, which is my East Coast main line, which will come up, go through sort of a heritage station, and sort of taking inspiration from York, having lived there, and then we end up in the northeast, heading into Scotland, and then reverse back. So I'm thinking of a way that I can make my East Coast main line basically trail taster by having a reverse loop at London, so it would just run continuously. And so this is probably a good point to then start introducing the loft. I realise at this point the video is just going to go on for about an hour, so I'm going to split it into 2 halves. So you've got a bit of a taster here, but I appreciate it probably doesn't make a lot of things clear. So I'm going to end this one at this point, except for one last bit thing I'm going to show you. So this is just me having some fun out in the shed with the new table saw. Hope you enjoy it, and I'll catch you next time up in the loft, where I'll go through the size of the room I've got and some of the issues that I'm having to deal with in planning a loft layout, and a lot of that will become clear on the next one. It's a good point to end on this one again, isn't it? So if you've ever watched video 1, Marcus Sweden, on his 5 tips for planning a railway, one of them was don't be over ambitious, and I sort of said at the point I'd failed, and I still clearly feel I'm failing on that one, Marco. Over ambitious. So sadly, this has been the life of my rolling stock for the last 2 years. All boxed up, ready to move and then transfer, and still living in boxes. These are the original box. This is the box that was up in the loft for 12 years with my old stations in, and sadly this old Epsom one had all my old rolling stock up in the loft for about 25 years. So I didn't really want to leave them stuck in these boxes whilst I was waiting to build this layout. So I had this spare bit of wall, so I decided to make my own display. So as you can see, I've got some inspiration up on the wall. I'm hoping these will just inspire me to crack on and get stuff going in the loft, because I'm fed up with having these in boxes. It's nice to see them out, and obviously the bottom one. So I've got my Wendover DMU 3 set, which should be going up to the loft first, and then obviously the underground's my phase 2. So for those of you who recognise it, you'll see that London Midlands, that's what we spent the last 25 years travelling up to London and up to Birmingham on. So they'll be going up in part of phase 3, along with my 125 intercity and some other stuff. I can put a couple more up, and I can get some longer, so I can get some longer trains up as well. I'll show you those another time. Anyway, as always, thanks for watching. Hope you enjoyed it. Maybe catch you next time. Cheers.